Coming up on Bridge City News, a man in Lethbridge is busted for making firearms from a 3D printer. Plus, we hear from the city about whether you need a special card to exempt you from wearing a mask. And Canada's top doctor gives Canadians some unusual sex advice.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Hello and thanks for joining us. An Alberta man has been charged for allegedly 3D printing firearm parts. Alert believes that this is the first time in Alberta that charges have been laid in a case like this. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly is at the Lethbridge Police Service headquarters with more. Ainsley, what do you know about the investigation?
Well, Jeanette, this is not a crime that we see often. 2 pistols, rifle lowers, multiple silencers, and bump stocks were found at the residence of a 53-year-old Picture Butte man, Dan Forsyth. Now, Alert Lethbridge says that they can't speak to the intent, but the investigation does involve alleged trafficking. And Sergeant Leon Borbandy says that if you have a 3D printer, blueprints can be available online, making it easy for anyone to take part in this emerging criminal activity.
3D printing allows people to make their own and traffic them and use them with very little accountability and traceability. So obviously it is a big concern. As technology improves, the polymers and frankly the online sharing of information, it'll undoubtedly increase, in my perception. We can try and combat it, and it's something that can be done in somebody's living room with very little traceability. You can buy the printer lawfully, and the blueprints are available on the internet for download.
There's been a lot of questions about the City of Lethbridge's new temporary mask bylaw, such as if you need to have a card to be exempt from wearing a face mask. As Micah Quinn explains, the city is clearing the air on the subject.
The City of Lethbridge temporary mask bylaw was passed on August 24th, and the city says they were recently made aware of bylaw exemption cards being sold online.
These cards are not from the City of Lethbridge, and we do not endorse them. We are not requiring residents to show proof of their exemption at any building or retail business.
Harper says businesses in Lethbridge have to post a sign about Bylaw 6239, but they can ask the public to provide a proof of exemption verbally.
We're not requiring to provide a doctor's note or a card that says they're exempt. We're relying on people's honesty, really, to follow the intent and the spirit of the bylaw, and to state that verbally if they're asked.
The city is still encouraging education regarding the temporary mask bylaw.
Continuing to focus on education and encouraging residents to wear a mask as a way to protect those around them. Please remember to be kind, respectful, and compassionate to each other, and we will all get through this together.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
On Wednesday, the province announced that $262 million in federal funding will be distributed to support Alberta's back-to-school plan. Of that, $4.1 million will be distributed to Lethbridge School District, and Holy Spirit School Division will receive $1.8 million, while Palliser School Division will receive $3.1 million. We spoke with Alberta legislative reporter Tyler Dawson, who gives us more of a breakdown.
Now, about $250 million is going to go to individual school boards and districts, and they can use that for a variety of things. You know, that might be more support for special needs students, that might be more PPE, that might be more staff generally. So they're really leaving those decisions up to school boards. Now, as you may have followed with the math there's a missing $12 or $13 million there. The government is keeping that money in reserve in case there are school boards that see, a really large influx of students or need some other support, and then that money will go to them.
Catch the full interview with Tyler Dawson coming up after the business news. Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips says making schools safe for students, staff, and families would require about double the amount Alberta received from Justin Trudeau. And she's asking why Jason Kenney won't match the funds from Trudeau to invest in a safe school reopening.
This is a government that has given away $4.7 billion in a corporate tax cut that has resulted in the loss of 50,000 full-time jobs before the pandemic, the loss of investment, and a shrinking economy. And yet they haven't put a red cent into making schools safe. If they actually wanted to ensure, better physical distancing and so on, it would have to be at least double of what the federal government has sent. It would be reasonable for the provincial government to match what Justin Trudeau has sent to us. They have done no such thing. They have not a dime for kids, but they have got bags of money, like in a cartoon, on a conveyor belt for large corporations who are not creating jobs and are taking that money elsewhere.
The Lethbridge Police Association says the Police Commission didn't make a responsible decision when they went along with former Police Chief Scott Wood's punishment of suspending an officer without pay. In a written statement, LPA President Jay McMillan says the commission is, quote, ill-equipped and largely unqualified to provide oversight that includes an objective and informed decision-making process. After allegations of assault were made against Constable David Easter, he was suspended without pay on August 23rd. According to McMillan, it's a penalty typically reserved for the most egregious offenses with extraordinary circumstances. He says, quote, there are guidelines for providing due process to anyone who is accused of an offense. He went on to say, quote, we are seeing all the scrutiny and consideration from the commission that you would see from someone getting to a decision by shaking their magic 8-ball, end quote. Lloydminster RCMP have arrested 4 Alberta men after turning up about 0.5 kilogram of what police believe to be cocaine. Officers also found heroin, marijuana, psychedelic mushrooms, and a gun. 37,000 cigarettes and more than $32,000 in cash. The seizures follow a 2-month investigation and the execution of 7 search warrants in the Lloydminster area. All 4 men are to appear in Lloydminster Provincial Court on September 22nd. For the sake of faith and spirituality, churches are returning to face-to-face activities under strict health protocols. After months of confinement and limitations on mobility to minimize contagion from COVID-19, worshipers can now find a somewhat unfamiliar norm.
First day, I think our congregation was excited to get back to church because we've all been missing it. We were all missing the community and the fellowship and worshiping together. And so we actually had a pretty good crowd on the first day back.
First day back was July 5th for the Gate Church, and they had approximately 70 people. Now it's a little different with 40 to 50 people attending services, which is 1/3 of church members. But the church continues to grow, and Esselmont and his team hope they can deliver an authentic experience.
It doesn't feel as welcoming because we're all wearing masks and stuff, no matter how much we try. But we do have a host team that's welcoming at the beginning when people come in, to make sure people feel welcome and that they know what's going on and what to expect coming in.
Protocols at the Gate Church seem all too familiar: distancing, sanitizing, and mandatory masks. Changes were also made to Sunday school.
Before COVID, we had a robust children's community, with lots of families and young kids. So during the service, we had what we call a baby gate and kids gate. So it's like a service for them with games and playing and music and teaching and all that good stuff. So
Our chairs are set apart for each family group or each cohort group to sit together, and each group is 6 feet apart. We also have a sanitizing station and a mask station as people come into the building. During worship, we have people wearing masks, especially now that they have to at all times, but even before that, we had them wearing masks while singing.
The young pastors believe there is a silver lining to the situation.
trusting God, but being able to come to Him with our feelings and to speak with Him about what we're going through and to ask Him the questions that we have.
In the middle of a crisis, that's when we need God most, but also that's also a time where God works the most.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Fall is in the air, and with that comes the closures of the outdoor pools. and city spray parks. Both the Gyro Spray Park, located behind Nicholas Sharon Arena, and the Rotary Fountain in Galt Gardens are slated to be shut down for the fall and winter season on Tuesday, September 8th. Henderson Pool's last day of operation will be Labor Day. The facility will be open holiday Monday from 12 p.m. until 7:30 p.m. weather permitting, and all visitors must pre-book online at aquatics.lethbridge.ca. Canada's top doctor gave Canadians some unusual sex advice on Wednesday. Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's chief public health officer, said in a statement that during this COVID-19 pandemic, the lowest risk of sexual activity involves yourself alone. But she also says if you choose to engage in an in-person sexual encounter with someone outside of your household or close contacts bubble, you should skip the kissing and avoid face-to-face contact, and consider using a mask during sex. Her statements received a lot of unintended attention, including on CNN last night. Hollywood's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and his family have tested positive to COVID-19. The Rock made the announcement over Twitter last night. In the tweet, Johnson says that all of them are on the other side of the virus and are healthy.
I wanted to give you guys a little helpful update on some of the things that I have been going through on my end for the past 2.5 to 3 weeks now. So the update is this. My wife, Lauren, as well as my 2 baby girls and myself, we have all tested positive for COVID-19. And I could tell you that this has been one of the most challenging and difficult things we have ever had to endure as a family. And for me personally too as well. And I've gone through some doozies in the past. I've gotten knocked about and got my ass kicked a little bit in the past.
Johnson is known for his many box office hit movies and his football career, which started here in Alberta as a Calgary Stampeder. The Parliamentary Budget Officer says the federal government has shortchanged provinces on their equalization payments over the past decade to the tune of $14.5 billion. The payments are required under the Constitution to make sure everyone has reasonably comparable public services. Yves Giraud's report cites rules that changed that were put in place following the last economic crisis. The federal Conservatives are trying another line of attack to investigate the We Charity scandal. After committee investigations were shut down when the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament, the Tories are now asking the official language commissioner to investigate the government's decision to have We run a student grant program. The opposition alleges the youth group did not have the capability to deliver the multi-million-dollar Canada Student Service Grant program in both official languages. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is on a virtual swing through Atlantic Canada today. He says he is standing by a commitment to increase old age security benefits for older seniors, but he told a St. John's radio station that the COVID-19 pandemic has forced the government to alter its priorities. Trudeau says there will be something for seniors in the throne speech, which is less than 3 weeks away. Alberta's police watchdog is seeing witnesses after RCMP officers shot and killed a man wanted for domestic aggravated assault Sunday night. The Alberta Serious Incident Response Team says police were told to be on the lookout for a man wanted in Saskatchewan. They tracked him using his cell phone to a location west of Edmonton, where they called the man who refused to stop and threatened to use a gun. An RCMP vehicle eventually made contact with the man's vehicle and ended the chase. The man was shot and killed in the ensuing confrontation. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden is meeting with the family of Jacob Blake, a black man who was shot 7 times in the back by a Wisconsin police officer. Blake's shooting set off weeks of protests in Kenosha that have at times erupted in violence. Biden is visiting the city to hold a discussion with business figures, civic leaders, and law enforcement officials. President Donald Trump went to Kenosha Tuesday but did not meet with the Blake family. He met with police. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is being criticized for an indoor hair salon visit in San Francisco, even though it's not allowed due to coronavirus. Video circulated this week from within the salon that shows Pelosi not wearing a mask and in close quarters with the stylists. Pelosi said she was complying with her salon's rules and is calling the whole thing a setup.
I take responsibility for trusting the word of a neighborhood salon that I've been to over the years many times, and that when they said, well, we're able to accommodate people one person at a time, and that we can set up that time, I trusted that. As it turns out, it was a setup, so I take responsibility for falling for a setup.
Here's some highlights from this day in history. Britain and France declare war on Nazi Germany. The Treaty of Paris ends the American Revolution, and NFL coach Vince Lombardi dies. Here is Today in History for September 3rd.
September 3rd, 1939. 2 days after Adolf Hitler's forces invade Poland, Britain and France declare war on Nazi Germany. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, whose policy of appeasing Hitler was meant to prevent what becomes World War II.
Yet I cannot believe that there is anything more or anything different that I could have done and that would have been more successful.
1783. Official end of the American Revolution as the United States and Britain signed the Treaty of Paris. Under the treaty, Britain recognizes the independence of its 13 breakaway colonies. 2004. A 3-day hostage siege at a school in southern Russia ends in bloody chaos. Chechen militants who seized the school in Beslan set off bombs, while Russian commandos stormed the building. More than 330 people, most of them children, are killed in the carnage. 1976. Viking 2, the unmanned American space probe, lands on Mars. The NASA craft takes the first close-up color photos of the red planet's surface. And 1970.
I want to say this, that it's a great game. It's a game of great lessons.
In Washington, NFL Hall of Fame coach Vince Lombardi dies of cancer. Lombardi, who led the Green Bay Packers to win the first 2 Super Bowls, was 57 years old. Today in history, September 3rd. Camille Bohannon, The Associated Press.
Hard to believe we're already getting close to our long weekend. We'll see the sunshine as we head into it, but we could see some showers this weekend as well. We'll have a full look at the weather coming up right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Here's a look at our weather for Lethbridge this evening. We should see some partly cloudy skies clearing after midnight with a northeast wind gusting to 40 at times. Into tomorrow, those winds are going to shift coming from the west, gusting to 40. 30 degrees though tomorrow. It should be a beautiful day with a humidex. It will feel like 32 degrees. Clear skies, lots of sunshine as we head into that long weekend. Now, the long weekend is a little bit strange. We got half of it beautiful, sunny, and hot, and part of it rainy. So mainly it's just Monday that's going to be rainy starting on Sunday night. But Saturday, look at this weather, 31 degrees here, sunshine. Mix of sun and cloud on Sunday with a high of 20 degrees. So that's quite a temperature variance there. And then as we head into Sunday night, we could see 60% chance of showers, rain for Monday with a high of 11 degrees only. And then 18 degrees it's expected for Tuesday with sunny skies. Sunshine also expected for next Wednesday with a high of 23. So we're seeing our temperatures vary from 31 down to 11, back up to the 20s. Almanac tells us the average for this time of year, the average temperature 23, average low 7. 37 was the high temperature on this day back in 1950, and -2 was our lowest temperature on this day in 1962. The sun rose this morning at 10 minutes before 7, right at 6:50 a.m. And our sunset tonight, 8:11 p.m. So let's take a look at the highs across the country for tomorrow. For our Friday, lots of sunshine on the west coast, expected 24 degrees for both Victoria and Vancouver. A beautiful 26-degree day right here in Calgary. lots of sunshine. Sunshine also expected in Edmonton with a high of 22. As we look to the rest of the prairies, we should see lots of sunshine as well throughout Saskatchewan and Manitoba. 22 the high for Saskatoon, 23 for Regina, and 20 degrees for Winnipeg with mainly clear skies. As we look further east into Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal, we could see a chance of showers in Montreal and Ottawa, 40% for both of those cities. 20 degrees is the high tomorrow for Ottawa. Montreal's high 21. 21 also expected right here in Toronto with sunny skies expected there. Now, as we look further into the Maritimes, this is where we can see our rain patterns happening. So Fredericton could see chance of showers with a mix of sun and cloud. High 28 though in Fredericton. Drizzle expected for both Halifax and Charlottetown. High of 25 in Charlottetown. Halifax high 21 tomorrow. 22 degrees is expected for our Friday in St. John's, Newfoundland, with a mix of sun and cloud. There you go. That is your weather. A new global poll suggests Canadian confidence in the economy saw a sharper dive over the summer than in any of the other countries surveyed. 61% of Canadians taking part in the Pew Research Centre's survey said Canada's current economic situation is bad. That's more than twice the 27% who said the same thing in 2019 before the COVID-19 crisis erupted. Canada had the sharpest uptick in negative assessments of 14 countries surveyed. Statistics Canada says the country's merchandise trade deficit widened to $2.45 billion in July, although imports and exports continued to build on strong gains in June. The trade shortfall was up from $1.59 billion in June, which was revised from the initial estimate of a deficit of $3.19 billion. The federal agency says exports were up 11.1% in July, while imports increased 12.7%, mainly due to growth in the motor vehicles and parts product category. Paul Ashworth of Capital Economics says trade is still a little shy of pre-pandemic levels, but the report provides more evidence that Canada's economy is recovering more quickly than initially expected. Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan solidified their Hollywood plans Wednesday with a production deal to make wide-ranging film and TV content for Netflix. The British prince and former actress will produce films and series for the streaming giant. That includes scripted series, docu-series, documentaries, features, and children's programming. Speculation about their production company has been swirling since January. However, Markle has no plans to return to acting. The couple also released a statement describing topics they plan on tackling with their productions. They say, quote, "Our lives, both independent of each other and as a couple, have allowed us to understand the power of human spirit, of courage, resilience, and the need for connection. Through our work with diverse communities and their environments, to shining a light on people and causes around the world, our focus will be on creating content that informs but also gives hope." Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The markets took a hit today as many investors sold off tech stocks en masse. The TSX was down 249.06 to 16,448. The Dow was down 807.77 to 28,292. The S&P 500 was down 125.78 to 34.55. And the Nasdaq was down 598.34 to 11,458. Oil was down 21 cents to 41.30 per barrel. Natural gas was unchanged at $2.49. Gold was down a penny to $19.30 an ounce. Silver was unchanged at $26.59 an ounce. Wheat is at $218 per metric ton. Barley is at $210. Canola is at $503. And corn is at $237 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 55 cents to 105.30. Feeder cattle were also down 110 to 139.55. Lean hogs were up 285 to 59.40. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly to 76.17 US.
And recapping one of our top stories today, an Alberta man has been charged for allegedly 3D printing firearm parts. Alert believes this is the first time in Alberta that charges have been laid in a case like this. And coming up after the break, we speak with National Post reporter Tyler Dawson, who gives us updates from the Alberta legislature. But first, here's a look at what's happening in your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Bring your lunch and enjoy beautiful live music at the same time. Come out September 4th to the first Friday Lunch and Listen concert series featuring performances by the University of Lethbridge Conservatory of Music in Cass's Community Room beginning 12:15 p.m. and ending at 1. First Friday events are an initiative brought to you by the Heart of Our City Committee. For a full listing of upcoming events, visit firstfridaylethbridge.com. A 100th birthday celebration for former Coaldale Mayor and lifelong resident Alan Graham is taking place Sunday, September 6th in Coaldale. To help kick it off is a Park and Sing event starting at 1 p.m. at the corner of 14th Avenue and 21st Street. Then at 1:30, the parade will proceed north on 21st Street toward the Gem of the West Museum parking lot, where you'll be able to drive past Allen, then park. Keeping COVID measures in mind, people can then join in and sing Happy Birthday. For details, visit coaldale.ca. Beginning September 9th, Lethbridge's Sport Council's Outdoor Roving Gyms program will take place Mondays and Wednesdays from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. behind Nicholas Sharon Arena. This program is for kids ages 5 and under and their caregivers. Come enjoy an hour of fun and get active. For details and to register, visit lethbridgesportcouncil.ca/roving gyms. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
It's back to school for Alberta students, and it's still a big political story in the province. To discuss this and more is our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Tyler, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
The province announced that $262 million in federal funding will be distributed to support Alberta's Back to School plan. Tyler, tell us more about the announcement.
Yeah, so this is the money that the federal government had promised to the provinces. So there's a chunk of cash going to every province in the country, education being a provincial responsibility, but the feds have decided to chip in. So Alberta's chunk is worth about 263 million, give or take. So what the province announced on Wednesday is what that money is going to go towards. Now, about $250 million is going to go to individual school boards and districts, and they can use that for a variety of things. That might be more support for special needs students, that might be more PPE, that might be more staff generally. So they're really leaving those decisions up to school boards. Now, as you may have followed with the math there's a missing $12 or $13 million there. The government is keeping that money in reserve in case there are school boards that see, a really large influx of students or need some other support, and then that money will go to them. And I was just looking a moment ago and pulled up the numbers, and the Lethbridge School District is going to get $4.1 million. And Medicine Hat is going to get $2.6 million. So, that's considerably less than somewhere like Calgary, which I think is getting about $44 million. But that's basically what the government is doing with this chunk of change. And that's been a big political controversy for about the past week or so.
Speaking about back-to-school announcements, this past weekend, Dina Hinshaw made an announcement regarding social distancing in classrooms, and it ruffled some feathers. She said that there was some confusion, though, and that she needed to clarify.
Yeah, that's right. So on Saturday, she signed this sort of health order that seemed to say there won't need to be physical distancing in schools. Now, as I'm sure many parents know, the deadline for deciding whether or not your kid is going back to school has, I think, almost everywhere, if not everywhere, passed. So parents have already made their decisions. And then when Dina Hinshaw, when this order came out, people thought, oh my goodness, I've already made this decision. I thought physical distancing was going to be a thing and so on. But the order is actually very, very specific. So physical distancing will need to be maintained in schools. The sort of exception to this is when class is happening, students are seated at desks, ideally not facing each other. So that's really what this was meant to clarify, was whether or not there are circumstances in which, if you've students at desks who can't be 2 meters apart, How does that work? So yeah, Hinshaw sort of walked that back on Monday. Well, I shouldn't say that. She didn't walk it back. She apologized for the lack of clarity on Monday, saying that it was her fault for putting this out so close to the start of school. Should have communicated it earlier, so on and so forth. And so, as you can see, there's just been a lot of drama about this. The NDP didn't get in too much on the criticism of Hinshaw, but they certainly have been attacking the government pretty much nonstop for the disbursement of this money, saying they waited too long and things like that. And just this week as well, Premier Kenney saying that he thinks some infections in school are going to be inevitable. Totally honest thing to say, most likely, but another thing that's going to be seized upon for sure on an abnormal year and an abnormal back to school, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And I'd like to see how those teachers are going to try to keep the kids spaced out like that too, like facing forward. It seems challenging in the classroom, absolutely. And now turning our attention from students to Alberta's growing senior population, the province announced plans to create more continuing care spaces. Where are they planning to implement this?
Yeah, so the details on this are a little bit foggy. The government came out on Tuesday, I think it would have been, with this announcement. There are currently 27,000 continuing care beds across Alberta. And that includes private facilities, public facilities. So this is going to create some sort of indeterminate extra number. It's not clear how many more at this point. And the thing to note about it is it's not capital costs. So they're not saying to a continuing care facility, build a new wing, we'll give you money for that. It's basically looking at facilities that might have the capacity to add a few more beds. So this is funding for more beds, not for more space to put beds in. And they released a list as well, allocating to, I believe it's the 30 communities that are most in need of more space. And I believe Lethbridge was one of those. So again, a little bit of an odd announcement, just, a little light on details. But the government's also had a rough ride of things with the back to school. So this could have been, if you're being ungenerous, you could say this was an attempt to change the channel. But certainly throughout the pandemic, for the last several years, continuing care space has been a huge issue, not just in Alberta, but across the entire country.
Yeah, 100%. And I think because they're looking at the growing age of the Alberta population, the seniors population growing and growing, right?
That's right.
So turning our gears elsewhere, there have been billboards put up in Edmonton and Ottawa saying Alberta should join the United States. I guess this shows that the separation drama is still going on in the background, Tyler?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think we talked about separatists a lot over the past year. And, like so many other politics stories and so many other aspects of our lives, the pandemic has, in large part put a stop to that. So, but people will remember the Wexit movement. And the fellow behind that has put these billboards up saying Alberta should become the 51st state. I would maybe posit that would not be an easy sell at this exact moment when you look at everything going on in the US, whether that's the pandemic, the presidential election coming up. Can't imagine it's an easy sell. But those billboards up in Edmonton and Ottawa, certainly generating a little bit of attention. And as you pointed out, this is still very much ongoing. There's another separatist party, Jay Hill, I believe, is the head of it, former Reform Party MP. News outlets still paying a little bit of attention to it. It just hasn't been quite as noisy lately. I think the federal Conservatives having their leadership race, the pandemic, there's just been other things on people's minds, but always percolating in the background, probably always will be, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so. Okay, let's talk about the Hyperloop train that the government is looking into. The province signed a memorandum of understanding with Transpod.
Yeah, that's right. So the Memorandum of Understanding allows for sort of further study of this project. And now the company needs to figure out whether or not this is a viable idea. So the Hyperloop is a basically an airplane fuselage inside a tube. Electromagnets are involved. A little bit unclear on the engineering, but the gist of it is that it'll go like 1,000 kilometers an hour to sort of suck people between Edmonton and Calgary, which would make that commute like a half-hour commute or something.
I know. It looks like something from the future when you look at the pictures, right?
It's absolutely wild. It's very cool if it ever gets pulled off. And I actually spoke to the CEO of the company last week, and what he said was, look, Alberta's actually a great place for this. It's really flat. You don't have hugely dense urban areas that get in the way of construction. So in terms of a place to test a project like this, maybe a good location. At least a 10-year timeline on this. Sorry to say it doesn't seem like it's going to go all the way down to Lethbridge, but people have been talking about the train between Edmonton and Calgary for, I mean, it's been decades. I looked it up, and the very first time the legislature studied this was in 1976, and it was actually Rachel Notley's father, Grant Notley, who put a motion in the legislature asking for this to be studied. So gosh, I feel like we do this every few years, again and again. But Hyperloop, next big possible thing on the mass transit high speed front.
Yeah, exciting, exciting. Okay, the fiscal update was released last week, and with a deficit of $24 billion and a debt closing in on $100 billion, do you think that the province could implement a provincial sales tax? Do you think that that's a possibility?
Well, it comes up perennially. This comes up, it feels like every provincial budget, every fiscal update. The United Conservatives have been very reluctant to endorse such an idea. They've flat out rejected it at the fiscal update. The politicians were asked about it, and they said now is not the time for new taxes on people. So we had the McKinnon report, if you back up a while, that said that Alberta has a spending problem. Let's accept that's true for sure. But I mean, I think certainly what the UCP is looking at right now, what the NDP has identified is that there's maybe also a revenue problem. That's well known too when the government is so heavily dependent on resource revenues. So the tool that many people suddenly point to is a PST. Could it happen? I suppose it could. I mean, I think the UCP needs to figure out something, especially depending how long the pandemic goes on for. And when you look at the size of the debt, the unemployment rate in double digits at the moment, certainly they're going to have to consider various options. Do I think they're going to consider a PST? I mean, I've heard no indication of that. That doesn't mean they won't, but it's a toxic thing in Alberta compared to other parts of the country. So it would be a very, very big step, I think, for the UCP to suddenly say, "Oh gosh, this is bad enough that we need to bring in a PST." That would be a tough political sell, I think.
It would be, yeah. They wouldn't exactly be everybody's favorite.
No.
All right. So the Alberta Party deferred its leadership contest this week. What can you tell us about that, Tyler?
Yeah, so another just a little nugget of Alberta politics news in there. The Alberta Party, former Edmonton Mayor Stephen Mandel was their leader during the last election. He lost. They don't have any members of the legislature at the moment. So they had a Zoom convention, I guess you might say. And basically, they've just kicked some of these decisions down the road. I mean, they've got a few years till the next election. I think 2023 maybe is when it ought to be. Hard, as the federal Conservatives figured out, pretty hard to run a leadership contest at the moment. So they've just sort of set that one aside. But it never hurts to remember that there are a handful of other parties in Alberta that are still sort of doing things in the background, even if they're not super prominent, even if they don't have seats in the legislature.
Along with Saskatchewan, our province turned 115 years old on September the 1st, and Kenny designated it as Alberta Day. Do you think that we'll be able to get a day off next year?
It would be so nice. I mean, logistically, it's maybe a problem because it's so close to Labor Day. But, I mean, who would turn down an extra day off? So if the Premier's watching, I think we can all agree that it should be a stat holiday. Yeah, 115 years, Alberta and Saskatchewan. So I was going to say it doesn't feel like that long, but I mean, what a silly thing. I wasn't there, so.
Yeah, it really doesn't look more than 100 at all.
Yeah, looking great for 150.
Yeah. And then, of course, Kenny offered up Alberta as a home for the Sir John A. Macdonald statue that was vandalized over the weekend in Montreal. Do you think that it would be safe here, though?
Well, probably not. I mean, these things, the statue thing is, we've had a few items come up today that, it just keeps happening over and over. And this is another one of them. I mean, that statue of Sir John A. Macdonald actually had its head cut off in the 90s by Quebec sovereigntists. There have been statues pulled down all over the world. There's all kinds of debates going on about the appropriateness of statues to historical figures with controversial records and beliefs. Would the statue be more safe here? I mean, maybe. He offered up the legislature grounds for it, I think was his offer, which is, I mean, that's probably objectively a more safe location than, say, if they plonk it down in, Edmonton's Churchill Square or something. But Montreal has committed more or less to putting it back up. The premier of Quebec has said it should go back up. The Montreal mayor has said it's going to be restored. So, Kenny made the offer, but I don't see the acceptance of that rolling in anytime soon. I've got to say.
Right, and with that, Tyler, we are out of time, unfortunately. Alberta correspondent for the National Post and our legislative reporter, Tyler Dawson. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Do you need some health advice? Well, today's guest regularly sees patients who struggle with many different health conditions. Dr. Clayton Cogano, a naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Well Vitality Health Clinic. He also has training in conventional medicine with a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science, Kinesiology, and 3 years of research on radiation and cancer at the University of Lethbridge. Dr. Cogano, welcome back to BCN.
Thank you for having me again.
Now, first of all, talk about your approach to finding solutions for the health struggles so many of us face on a daily basis.
Well, I guess in my office, I see a lot of different various things. You always want to try and get to the root cause of the problem when they come in, because a lot of patients that I see have been unable to figure out what's wrong with them. And so the very first thing that I want to do is sit down with them take a long time to go through all of their health history, all their medical history, all their labs. And you want to kind of sort through all of that and then figure out from there a plan moving forward. A lot of time it's history taking, and then further to that, further lab testing, either more in-depth lab testing or even just your general lab testing that just wasn't done. Often you can figure it out.
Now, you've said that in your daily practice, you sometimes come across chronic fatigue with a lot of your patients now. How common is chronic fatigue in today's society, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Honestly, people put too much on their plates. People are very busy. That's one of the main reasons for chronic fatigue. There's a lot of other reasons, but it is extremely common in my practice. Yeah.
What are some of the causes of chronic fatigue? Like you said, being very busy, not getting enough rest, perhaps?
Yeah, and it kind of compiles onto other things. When stress is elevated, often people aren't sleeping well. Sometimes people can have other issues like perhaps low B12, blood sugar irregularities, low iron. So it's important to, in my opinion, even thyroid issues, and sometimes thyroid issues can get missed. So it's important to test things and test things in depth. And look at the complete history of what's going on and what's been going on in order to figure it out.
So what are some of the effective treatments outside of B12 and maybe cutting some of the stress out of our lives?
Well, it completely varies. Like a lot of times, if someone's having trouble sleeping, you have to try and start figuring out why they can't sleep. If someone has, for example, a lot of stress, you can't just tell them to quit work if work is their big stressor. You have to try and figure out ways to work around it, against the grain sometimes. So the first thing is to figure out what's wrong. For example, if it was a cortisol issue, which tends to be the case with a lot of patients with chronic stress leading to chronic fatigue, a lot of times you will want to treat that with different vitamins and herbs. And then as that improves, you want to double check that you're not missing anything. Like perhaps that person also has low iron or their thyroid isn't working properly. You have to treat the whole person in order to fix chronic fatigue. Otherwise, you'll get a patient that gets about 50% better and then plateaus.
Other people I've spoken to as well in the healthcare professional saying, focusing on God's word and meditating and breathing that helps a lot as well. How about certain foods when it comes to stress? Are there certain foods as well that you can eat that can really help?
Lifestyle change is massive. It is massive. It is also probably one of the most difficult things for me to help someone with. You can tell people all day long to do something here and do something there, but ultimately that's the hardest thing for me because it's up to them when they go home to do it. In terms of foods, yes, absolutely. Eating a healthful diet, eating a whole food diet, even looking into food sensitivities, that can create a ton of fatigue in people if they're battling the food that they're eating all the time. So it's important, again, to look into things and take a complete history, because what I find actually is clinically, people that are coming in, They're coming in with bags of supplements and they're still tired. And it's not a supplement deficiency in people. It's a multitude of system failures that's causing it, and you have to figure it out.
Dr. Cogano, many people also go through bouts of insomnia. They just can't get any sleep. What do you think causes that? Is it a big part of it is not putting your phone down when you go to bed at night?
Again, yeah, a lot of lifestyle changes. Yes, there absolutely is. A lot of people don't prepare for bed. You know, they have their TV in their bed, they're on their phone. It's a social area now versus an area just for sleep. And so that is a huge thing. There's other reasons as well for insomnia, and insomnia it can be a tricky thing. Sometimes breathing issues like sleep apnea can create patients that just don't get a restful sleep or not at all. Anxiety is a huge thing, and that goes hand in hand with chronic fatigue and chronic stress in general leads to a lot of anxiety, in which we can help a lot with. And then there's other things like, for example, different neurological issues with the brain. Now, unfortunately, we can't test those. So that would be like, for example, a slight deficiency of melatonin or a slight deficiency of GABA, which is a neurotransmitter in your brain that stops the busy signal. But we don't know if it's one or the other or something else. And so in those cases, we have to guess with different herbs, different vitamins to try and fix it. Often you can, but it takes a couple tries for sure.
You know, I remember years ago, my doctor told me, yeah, the herbs and the vitamins are good, but also at the same time, some warm milk. Is that still applied today, or maybe reading a book to help somebody fall asleep if you suffer from insomnia?
Oh yeah, well, I think the warm milk thing is more calming, right? I think. I don't know about that one, but I know that certain herbs like, chamomile tea is really calming. Rosemary is very calming. Passion flower root specifically, you can drink it as a tea, you can take it as a supplement. It just makes you calm. It doesn't necessarily put you to sleep, but it helps get your body ready for sleep.
Ever consider using CBD oil or capsules as a treatment for insomnia?
Yeah, CBD. It's a fairly new thing, especially since the legalization process. A lot of doctors are now delving into more research on it. Some of the research is promising on CBD for quite a lot of things, neurological things especially. So I think in certain cases of, for example, neurological insomnia, where there might be a brain chemical imbalance, something going on, it may prove benefit. And more research, the jury is still kind of out on it. And in some cases, it's been shown to actually make sleep worse. And some people will actually get anxiety on it. And so I think it's a potential option for people, but they definitely should talk to their doctor about it before they just go start taking anything, really. You want to be focused and accurate on what you're taking. That way, you end up just with better results overall.
Let's move on right now and talk about digestive health, Dr. Cogano, and let's talk specifically about the condition called leaky gut. What exactly is leaky gut?
Leaky gut is the general term for something called intestinal permeability, increased intestinal permeability. And what that means is that the enterocytes, or the cells in your small intestine, are slightly inflamed and irritated, and they're allowing larger protein particles of food to get into your bloodstream. And when a big piece of protein gets into your bloodstream, your body's not used to it. It's used to it being broken down to a certain size. So it sees it as foreign, and it starts to kind of attack it, and it can create an inflammatory response called an immunoglobulin response. And that can have widespread systemic effects on the body, meaning you could get anything from rosacea, eczema, psoriasis, acne, to chronic fatigue, to joint pain, to gut pain, to IBS. And so the testing for something like that is, I find, very beneficial to helping people who have a multitude of symptoms, especially those with gut issues like IBS, because irritable bowel syndrome is a diagnosis that doesn't tell anyone what the problem actually is. Most patients come into the office knowing their gut's irritated. So me telling them that they have irritable bowel syndrome does not help anyone. We have to try and figure it out. And one way to figure it out is through a blood test called an IgG blood test that can actually start looking at, oh, maybe what foods is this person sensitive to help them.
So what are some of the effective treatments for leaky gut?
I honestly, the first biggest thing is to try and figure out what foods or what product is irritating their gut and eliminate it. You have to get rid of the cause of the irritation. Sometimes the cause of the irritation is something more severe, like inflammatory bowel disease, like an autoimmune thing, maybe like celiac or heavy metal exposure, perhaps even antibiotics. So you got to get rid of whatever thing is irritating it first, and then you have to start working to heal the gut. And often I use a combination of L-glutamine and a high dose of omega-3, specifically a component in that called EPA, which is an anti-inflammatory. So you want a nice strong anti-inflammatory in the gut, and then you want glutamine, which helps to heal and bind the gut cells back together.
Now, there are many body cleanses in the market today. What do you think of those which claim to really cleanse your liver?
I think that there's overclaim to what a lot of them can do. I think that some will have benefit, but you also have to be careful. I just saw a patient just the other day that did a liver cleanse and ran into some serious issues because her liver didn't need it. And honestly, she even had some liver issues. I think that liver detoxes, and well, she didn't know, right? And so it ended up being an issue. I think you have to be cautious with it, but I think that the general idea behind it is positive. I think really it's meant to, detoxes, especially in the liver, are meant to improve circulations, maybe give your organs a little bit of a rest, improve toxic elimination, because that's what the liver does. So yes, you can absolutely do that. Provide your body with better nutrients, and even just increasing circulation, and really that's what a detox should be all about, is improving health, not depleting the body of a bunch of things.
We talk about alcohol potentially damaging the liver. How about certain foods that may have the same effect?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of different foods that can damage the liver. Certainly you want to make sure that you're eating a healthful diet and a whole foods diet. And I find that the biggest thing is variety in the diet, because the liver itself is like a giant filter. So the more healthy whole foods, antioxidant foods that you're eating, the better it's going to function.
So a lot of berries, blueberries, raspberries, right? That really helps?
Exactly. The nice thing about the liver is it is one of the only things in your body that can regenerate. So if it's down to a quarter functionality, it will regenerate to 100%. But the biggest catch-22 with that is that often what we see is that people that have a liver capacity that's so low, they're often alcoholics or they're drug addicts, or they have issues that they cannot stop. So it often continues the decline. However, if you start treating your body healthfully, then that is one organ that can regenerate.
When is a good time for a detox? Any symptoms to look for that would signal that you need to do a detox? And I'm not talking about drugs or alcohol specifically here.
Oh, yeah. So in terms of timing, often if I'm going to tell a patient to do a detox, because detoxes can be a little bit depleting, often I say spring or summer. I find a lot of people are already extra fatigued in the winter. There's more disease going around, more influenza. And so you want to make sure that you're more boosting your body up in the winter. I think that spring and summer, you're a little bit more energetic. Your body's a little bit better to handle something like that. So timing wise, that's definitely when you want to be doing them. Yeah.
What are some of the benefits of probiotics? There are different doses of probiotics. Now, do you go for one with the most?
No, you have to be careful with probiotics. It's also sort of an area that we don't fully understand yet in medicine. It's a fairly new thing in medicine, probiotics. We know that they're beneficial and they have lots of health benefits, but the microbiome in our gut is extremely complex. And there's certain times where you don't want to take a probiotic. For example, when I'm doing a gut healing protocol for leaky gut, right? I often now don't give a probiotic with it. And the reason is because sometimes people with gut issues also have other things along with it, perhaps candida, which is yeast or fungal overgrowth, or even something else called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. And if the person has those things and we haven't tested them to rule them out, then a probiotic actually would make those conditions worse, and it would actually make the person feel worse. But by and large and in general, a probiotic for most people is safe, it's effective, it can boost up your immune system, and you don't need a massive quantity. A lower dose of probiotic typically is just fine, and you just want a multi-strain. So often you want to replete it with 11 to 12 billion or 11 to 12 different types of bacteria.
Dr. Clayton Coggino, naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Well Vitality Health Clinic. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much, Hal. Take care.
You too. On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.